Diving in again. This time, it's James 1.12. We're talking about finding strength and even joy in the hard times.
Yeah.
You know, those tough spots we all hit. And you've given us some seriously sharp analysis of this verse.
Thanks.
So we're going deep, beyond the surface, right?
Absolutely.
Unearthing that practical wisdom that people can actually put to use.
Love that.
Not just some feel-good stuff, but real tools for real life. But before we get too far, I got to ask. This whole idea of those who persevere being blessed,
Right.
it's a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
what makes someone going through hardship truly happy?
Yeah, it's not your typical blessed image, is it?
Definitely not.
But there's a lot packed into that word, especially in the original Greek. It goes way beyond just feeling good. It's this deep spiritual joy, this sense of well-being that comes from being right with God, even when things are rough.
So it's like less about circumstances, more about something deeper.
Exactly. And I think the historical context really sheds light on that. James was writing to early Christians, right?
Right.
And they were facing intense persecution. Their faith was being tested constantly with incredibly high stakes.
Wow, so this isn't just some inspirational quote on a poster.
No, not at all.
This is battle-tested advice, forged in the fires of real struggle.
Exactly. This is wisdom born from hardship.
Powerful stuff. Okay, so with that backdrop, let's unpack perseverance a bit, because it's clearly not just about gritting your teeth and pushing through, right?
Definitely not. It's not about white-knuckling it. Think of it more like a marathon runner.
Okay, I'm listening.
Eyes on the finish line, even when their muscles are screaming. They keep pushing not out of stubbornness, but out of belief that the goal is worth the pain.
So it's about vision, about having that bigger picture in mind.
Absolutely. And that's where faith and hope come in. That deep conviction that God is with us, that there's something incredible waiting on the other side of the struggle.
That makes me think of that classic analogy, the gold refining process.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
The heat's intense, it reveals impurities, but it also makes the gold stronger, more valuable.
It does. And the source material uses that analogy brilliantly. And if we dig a little deeper, what are some of those impurities that trials might burn away in us?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Pride, for instance.
Oh yeah, that one.
A trial might force us to admit our limitations, to lean on God more, or maybe selfishness. Hardship often pushes us to put others' needs before our own.
Those are great points. It's like the trial refines us, makes us more pure.
Exactly. It burns away the things that hinder us, makes us more like Christ.
And speaking of things that stand out in this passage, there's that whole crown of life image, right? It always captures my attention. What did a crown represent in that culture back then?
Crowns were for victors.
Oh, wow.
For heroes, those who achieved ultimate success, the symbol of honor, the ultimate accomplishment.
So we're not talking about a literal crown here, obviously.
Definitely not. This is about something far greater.
Okay, so what is it about?
The eternal reward, being with God, experiencing that fullness of life He intended for us, the ultimate victory, you could say.
That's powerful. But I can already hear some folks pushing back a bit, saying, wait, crown of life, that sounds kind of materialistic.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's important to remember that the Bible uses these physical metaphors to help us grasp spiritual realities. That crown is pointing to something way beyond material wealth or earthly recognition. It's about that immeasurable joy, the fulfillment that comes from being in this loving, eternal relationship with God.
So it's more about a state of being than any physical thing.
Exactly. And it's interesting, the verse emphasizes love for God, right? It doesn't just say, blessed are those who survive hardship.
Right.
It specifically says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him.
There's a connection there for sure. Love and perseverance.
It's the fuel, isn't it? Think about it. We endure discomfort, pain, even suffering for the sake of those we deeply love.
Absolutely.
Our love for God, that's the most powerful motivating force in the Christian life. It's what sustains us when it's hard, when we're tempted to throw in the towel.
So it's less about willpower and more about this deep, passionate commitment to God.
Absolutely. And that leads to another key point. James makes it very clear that trials are an inevitable part of the Christian experience.
Oh, he does not shy away from that.
Not at all. Later on, he even says we should consider it pure joy when we face trials of many kinds.
Whoa, pure joy. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is. But remember, even Jesus himself said, in this world you will have trouble.
Right. He didn't sugarcoat it either.
Exactly. And I think it's important to acknowledge that reality, but both James and Jesus, they're not saying this to discourage us, are they?
I don't think so.
They're preparing us. They're saying, look, life will throw curveballs, but there's a way to navigate through them that leads to growth, to even deeper joy.
So it's not about bracing for constant negativity, but knowing that when it hits, we're not alone and there's a path forward.
Exactly. And that path, it often involves growth.
It's like a spiritual workout in a way.
That's a great analogy. Think about a tough workout. Nobody enjoys the burn in the moment, but you do it for the long-term benefits.
Right. Results.
Exactly. Spiritual trials are similar. They can be painful, agonizing at times, but they have the potential to refine our faith.
Strengthen our character.
Yeah.
Draw us closer to God even.
All of that. And that crown of life, it reminds us those trials are temporary. The reward, well, that's eternal.
It's that eternal perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
Makes the struggles of today feel less overwhelming because we know there's something greater coming.
Right. And James is honest. He doesn't say trials are easy, but he makes it clear they are worth it for those who love God. There's purpose in the pain.
That's a really important point.
It is. It changes how we approach those difficult seasons.
It does. It's like we're being given a roadmap for navigating those tough times with faith and even finding meaning in them. But I'm curious. James uses that powerful gold refining analogy. Is there anything else in the source material that digs deeper into how trials actually refine us? What does that look like, practically speaking?
Oh, there's a fascinating anecdote in the text. There's the story about a woman, she lost her job totally out of the blue.
Oh, wow.
Devastating, right. It was her income, but also a big part of how she saw herself.
Yeah, that's tough.
But as she started looking for new work, something interesting happened. She was forced to face some not-so-healthy work habits.
Like what?
She was a bit of a workaholic,
Uh,
defining her worth by how much she produced, and she realized she'd been neglecting other parts of her life, her family, her faith.
so the job loss, as painful as it was, kind of forced her to reevaluate things.
It did. It was a wake-up call. Painful, yes, but it became a chance to reset her priorities. She found a new job eventually, one that was a much better fit for her well-being. A true refining process, you could say.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself.
Exactly. And that's where trusting God's plan comes in, even when it doesn't make sense to us. We might not see the purpose in the moment, but as we go through it, as we let God work, those trials, they can become catalysts for some really amazing changes.
That reminds me of something else that really jumped out at me in the source material. It said, trials aren't just random things that happen, but they're part of God's plan for our lives. I got to be honest, that's a tough one to swallow sometimes, especially when I'm hurting.
Oh, I get it. Totally natural to question why we have to go through the hard stuff. But the Bible is pretty clear on this point. God works all things together for good for those who love him. That includes the trials.
So even though it might not feel like it at the time, God is actually using those experiences to shape us, to refine us.
Exactly, to bring about something good in our lives, even if we can't see it yet. And the text highlights some specific reasons why God might allow us to face trials. One of them is to test our faith.
Okay, so it's not that he's trying to trip us up.
No, not at all. It's more like he's helping us grow stronger, just like gold is tested in fire, right? Our faith is tested through trials. It reveals what's genuine.
I see. So it's about helping us identify those weak spots in our faith so we can work on them.
Exactly. And it forces us to lean on God more, which strengthens our trust in him.
It's like a feedback loop. The more we trust, the more we can endure, and that deepens our trust even more.
You got it. But there are other reasons, too. The text also talks about trials refining our character.
Okay, that makes sense. When we're going through tough times, we have to practice patience, humility, self-control.
Think of it like a boot camp for those character traits. They get a supercharged workout in the middle of a trial.
I like that. Boot camp for character. And, going through those tough times ourselves, it makes us more understanding of others who are struggling.
Oh, for sure. We've been there, so we can empathize. And maybe most importantly, trials can draw us closer to God. When we're hurting, when we're desperate, we're more likely to turn to him for help.
It's like we realize we can't do it on our own. We need something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And when we experience God's faithfulness in the midst of those trials, our relationship with him, it changes, becomes deeper, more intimate. We start to appreciate his love and grace in a whole new way.
So even though they're painful, trials can actually be beneficial. It's like a paradox. The things we see as setbacks actually become stepping stones to a stronger faith.
It's one of those beautiful mysteries, isn't it? And it's a core lesson in James 1.12. Trials aren't something to fear or avoid, but to embrace.
Embrace as opportunities for growth.
That's it. And the source material gets into some practical ways to apply those principles of James 1.12 to our lives. It's not just theory, it's about actually living this out.
So give us the goods. What does that look like in practice?
First, we need to change our perspective on trials. Instead of seeing them as something negative, something to avoid at all costs, we can choose to see them as opportunities for growth.
I love that idea, but how do we actually do that? Especially when we're in the thick of it.
One powerful thing is to focus on God's promises. It's so easy when we're struggling to get swallowed up by our circumstances to forget that God is with us, that He has a plan, and that ultimately He's working it all out for our good.
So instead of dwelling on the negative, we need to actively remind ourselves of God's faithfulness, His love for us.
That's it, and there's no shortage of those promises in the Bible. We can meditate on verses like Romans 8.28.
Oh, yeah. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose.
Exactly, or Isaiah 41.10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
It's like having a whole arsenal of truth to combat those negative thoughts. It makes me think it's important to have those verses handy, maybe even memorized, so we can draw on them when we need them most.
Absolutely. And along with focusing on God's promises, the text also encourages us to lean on other Christians. We don't have to go through this alone.
That's so important. Having people around us who can pray, encourage, offer practical help, that makes a huge difference.
It really does. It's one of the most beautiful things about the church, right? It's this community of people committed to supporting each other, especially during the hard times.
So true. So if you're going through a trial, reach out. Don't try to tough it out on your own. Your church family, your friends, your mentors, they want to help.
And speaking of help, the text also highlights prayer.
Prayer, our lifeline.
It is, and it's especially important during trials.
It's funny, it's the first thing we should turn to, but often the last thing we remember. We try to figure things out on our own when the most powerful resource is literally a conversation away.
Isn't it? Through prayer, we can pour out our hearts to God, ask for His wisdom and guidance, and receive His comfort.
And sometimes I find when I'm in a really tough spot, I don't even know what to say. I just feel overwhelmed.
I've been there.
But even just crying out to God, expressing that pain and frustration, that can be so cathartic in itself.
It is, because authenticity matters. God wants us to come to Him just as we are, with all the messiness, doubts, fears, anger, confusion. He can handle it.
He wants to hear it all.
He does. And sometimes those raw, honest prayers are the ones that lead to the biggest breakthroughs.
They really are.
Yeah.
But it's not just about talking to God. It's also about listening to what He has to say back to us.
Through His word, absolutely.
The Bible is full of wisdom and encouragement for when we're going through those trials. It's like our guidebook.
And it's not just about reading, but meditating on it, letting those truths sink deep into our hearts.
Any tips for that? Sometimes I read and it's like it just washes over me.
Something that helps me, I choose a specific passage, maybe just a verse or two, and really focus on it throughout the day. I'll write it down, put it on my phone's lock screen, even say it out loud.
Saturate your mind with it.
Exactly. That way, it's there when you need it most. And the more we do that, the more natural it becomes to turn to God's word for comfort and guidance.
It's like training our minds to go to the right place when the pressure hits.
Right. And all these practical tips we're talking about, the perspective shift, focusing on promises, seeking support, prayer, reading the Bible, they're all connected, aren't they?
It's like a web of support.
Exactly. It's not about picking and choosing, but embracing a holistic approach to those tough times.
And it all circles back to that core message of James 1.12. Trials aren't a sign that something's wrong. They're not punishment. They're an opportunity, a refining fire, a path to something far greater.
And we don't have to walk that path alone. We have God's presence, His promises, His people, His word, and His spirit to empower us every step of the way.
This has been so insightful, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one more thing that really struck me in the source material. It talks about how trials can actually be a chance to share our faith. It's not something we always think about, but it's so powerful. Can you say more about that?
You know, when people see us going through something tough, but still holding on to our faith, trusting God, even finding joy in the midst of it, it gets their attention.
It's different. It's countercultural.
Right. It makes them wonder. They start asking questions like, how are you staying so positive? Or what gives you hope? And those questions open the door for us to share about our faith.
Our trials become a platform, in a way, for God's grace to shine through.
Exactly. And the source material really encourages us to be open about our trials, to share our stories, let people know how God has helped us.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect, but about being real, being vulnerable, letting God use our experiences to touch others.
That's it. And when we do that, when we let our trials become a testimony, we're not only strengthening our own faith, but we're planting seeds in the hearts of others.
This has been such a rich conversation, and I feel like we could keep going. But as we wrap up, is there anything else in the source material that you think is super important for our listener to take away? Any final wisdom or encouragement?
One thing that really resonated with me is the focus on finding meaning and purpose in our trials.
Yes, it's so easy to just see the negative, but this idea that trials can lead to something positive, a deeper sense of purpose, that's so encouraging.
It is, the text challenges us to ask, what is God teaching me through this? How is he using this to shape me?
It's like viewing those trials as a refining fire, purifying us, stripping away what doesn't matter, and revealing our true potential.
Love that image. And when we embrace that perspective, we open ourselves up to a whole new level of meaning in our lives.
It's like we're partnering with God in the process, even in the midst of the pain.
Exactly. And that ties back to the crown of life, right? The eternal reward. It's a reminder that the struggles here are temporary, but our reward in heaven, that's forever.
So even though the road might be long and difficult at times, we can keep going because we know where it leads.
And the source material encourages us to really picture it, that crown of life, to imagine what it will be like to be in God's presence for eternity. Hold on to that image.
It's like a mental vacation to our eternal home, a reminder that our struggles are temporary, but our reward is everlasting. But for the listener who's maybe struggling to grasp that concept, who's feeling the weight of their current trials, what would you say?
I'd remind them they're not alone. God is with them. He'll never leave them, never forsake them.
And that His grace is enough. His power is made perfect in our weakness.
Yes. And fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. He endured the cross for us. He knows suffering. He's our example, our hope, our strength.
It all comes back to Him, doesn't it?
It does. It's not about our ability to endure, but about God's power working in us, through us. That's why we can face trials with confidence.
We're not relying on our own strength.
Right. We're drawing on the strength that God provides, the strength made perfect in our weakness.
This has been incredible, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one last thing from the source material that really stood out to me. The idea that trials can actually be a way to share our faith with others. Not something we typically think about, but so powerful.
You know, when people see us going through something tough, but we're still holding on to our faith, trusting God, even finding joy, it makes them curious.
It's like they're seeing something different, something they don't understand.
It is, and it often leads to questions like, how are you staying so positive? Or what gives you hope? And those questions, they open the door to share our faith.
Our trials become a platform for God's grace to shine through, for His love to reach others.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the source material really emphasizes being open about our trials, sharing our stories, letting people know how God has helped us.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect, but about being authentic, being vulnerable, letting God use our experiences to impact others.
Exactly. And when we do that, when our trials become a testimony to God's faithfulness, we're not only strengthening our own faith, but we're planting seeds of faith in others.
That's amazing. We're turning those tough times into something that can bless others. This has been such a rich conversation, and I feel like we could talk about this for hours. But as we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else from the source material that you want to highlight? Any last words of wisdom or encouragement for our listener?
One thing that stuck with me is the idea of finding meaning in our trials. It's easy to just see them as negative, but this concept that they can lead to something positive, a sense of purpose, that's really encouraging.
It is. The text challenges us to ask, what's God teaching me through this? How is He shaping me?
Right. It's about seeing those trials as a refining fire, something that's purifying us, revealing our true potential.
And when we embrace that perspective, it opens up a whole new level of meaning and purpose.
It does. We're not just victims of circumstance, we're active participants in the process. even when it's painful.
And it all leads back to that image of the crown of life,
Yeah.
right? That reminder that our present suffering is temporary, but our reward, that's eternal.
So don't lose heart. Keep your eyes on Jesus. He's the author and finisher of our faith. And let's run this race with endurance, knowing that the crown of life is waiting at the finish line.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I'm so grateful for your insights. I have no doubt our listener has been encouraged and equipped to face their own trials with a renewed sense of faith and hope.
It's been a pleasure talking with you about this powerful passage.
And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, you're not alone. God is with you, and He will never leave you. Keep trusting Him, keep pressing on, and never give up hope. The crown of life awaits you. Until next time, keep diving deep. You know it's really something how a verse like James 1.12 can be so short, but have so much packed into it.
Oh, it's amazing.
That crown of life imagery that really shifts things, doesn't it?
It's powerful.
It's like you're not just trudging through the muck anymore. Suddenly you're in this race, and there's this incredible finish line waiting.
Exactly. It's about perspective.
This deep dive, it's helped me see that even the tough stuff I'm dealing with right now, it can be part of that journey towards something amazing, something way bigger.
That's what James is getting at. And remember, he doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't say trials will be a walk in the park.
No, he doesn't.
But he does promise God will be right there with us every step of the way. And the source material really hits on that. God isn't off somewhere distant when we're struggling.
Yeah.
He's right there in the thick of it with us, offering strength, comfort, guidance.
Which makes me wonder, if God is so powerful,
Yeah.
why not just take away the trials altogether? Why let us go through those hard things in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Oh,
So many people wrestle with that. And the source material actually offers some thought-provoking answers. One point it makes is that trials can actually bring us closer to God. Think about it. When we're facing challenges, we're more likely to reach out to Him, to lean on Him, to really experience His comfort. We need Him more.
It's like those difficult times force us to depend on God in a way we might not otherwise do, push us out of our comfort zones.
Exactly. And through that, our relationship with Him grows deeper. We learn to trust Him more, experience His grace more deeply. It's like that saying, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors.
I love that.
Trials, as tough as they are, they can actually help us build a stronger, more resilient faith. It's the tough stuff that makes us stronger.
Like refining a metal, I guess. Got to go through the fire to become stronger. And that reminds me, the source material talk about trials revealing our true character too.
Oh, it's true. It's like those difficult times, they strip away the superficial, they show us what we're really made of deep down.
Yeah, it's like a test.
It is a refining process. Trials might expose our weaknesses, but they also often reveal those hidden strengths we never knew we had.
I like that.
We develop perseverance, patience, humility, compassion even, courage, all those things that are essential for living a life that really honors God.
It's amazing how those qualities often come out strongest when we're facing adversity.
It's like the pressure, the heat of the trial, it forges something new in us, something beautiful, something resilient.
There's beauty in the brokenness, in a way.
There is. And the source material takes it a step further, suggesting that trials can help us find a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in life.
Oh, wow.
They help us figure out what really matters.
I see.
To line up our lives with what God wants. To discover those gifts and talents He's given us. It's like the trials clarify things.
So it's not just about getting through the trials, but letting them actually shape us.
That's it. And when we do that, when we surrender to God's plan, even the toughest times can become like stepping stones. They lead us to a more fulfilling, more purposeful life.
That's a powerful shift in thinking. It's not just about survival, but about thriving, even in the midst of those difficult seasons.
Exactly. It's about seeing the opportunity in the obstacle.
This whole deep dive has been such an eye-opener for me. I feel like I have a completely new understanding of James 1.12 now. It's not just a verse anymore. It's a guide, a roadmap for going through life's challenges with faith and courage and hope. And it all points back to that image, that crown of life.
It does. It's a reminder that even in the middle of our struggles, God is working. He's working all things together for good for those who love Him.
That's powerful.
It is. He's shaping us, refining us, preparing us for something way more glorious than we can even imagine.
So much bigger than what we're going through right now.
Right. So let's not give up. Let's keep our eyes on Jesus. Remember, He's the one who makes it all possible. And let's run this race knowing that the crown of life is waiting at the finish line.
This has been amazing. Truly, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know our listeners are going to be encouraged and equipped to face their own trials with more faith and hope.
It has been a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And to our listener, thank you for being here with us. Remember, you are not alone. God is with you, and He will never leave you. Keep trusting Him, keep going, and never lose hope. That crown of life, it's waiting for you. Until next time, keep diving deep.